Tis 1944 fighter jet made black cadets better pilots than today's Biog.36s. The Crucible. The Belpi Biog Unshat era comet sat on the Tuskegee airfield like a promise and a threat. America's first jet fighter, sleek and revolutionary, with engines that screamed instead of roared. In the winter of 1944, while the rest of the Army Air Forces traded the Biog Unshat as an experimental curiosity, too slow for combat, too unstable for frontline service, someone in Washington had a different idea. Give it to the Negro pilots. See what they can do with it. Lieutenant Samuel Prophet Mitchell stood before the aircraft at dawn, his breath fogging in the Alabama cold. At 23, he was one of the youngest Tuskegee graduates, a sharecropper's son from Georgia who learned to fly in a crop duster held together with prayer and baling wire. Now he was staring at technology that belongs in the future. They're setting us up, sighed Captain Isaiah Cross, the senior black pilot assigned to the jet program. Cross was a veteran of 30 missions over Europe, a man who had earned his wings when the world sighed black men couldn't fly. The Biog Unshat failed every combat evaluation. Top speed barely to Schumpf, German props flee faster. Guns jam constantly. And it's got a glide ratio like a brick. Samuel studied the twin jet engines mounted in the wings, the clean lines that spoke of speed even while standing still. Around them, other pilots gathered, 12 men handpicked for this experimental program. 12 men who knew they weren't chosen for their skill, but for their expendability. Consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of many kinds, Samuel quoted softly, his grandmother's voice echoing in his memory. James ek, dui march. Because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance. Save your scripture, prophet, muttered Lieutenant Marcus Cunny, a Chicago native who flew with mathematical precision. Faith doesn't overcome basics. This jet can outlimb, outturn, or outgun anything the Luftwaffe has. They gave us a lemon and called it innovation. But Samuel's mind was already working, seeing patterns others missed. Had grown up making do with broken tools, creating solutions from scraps. His father had taught him that limitation was just creativity waiting to happen. What if that's the point? Samuel sighed, drawing the others' attention. What if this isn't about the jet being good enough for us? What if it's about us becoming good enough for something else? The white commanding officer, Colonel Preston Hardwick, emerged from the operations building, his expression carrying the same disdain Samuel had seen his entire life. Hardwick was old Army, a man who believed segregation was both natural law and military necessity. Gentlemen, Hardwick announced without warmth, you're about to become America's first jet pilots. The Biog Unshat program has struggled to find suitable candidates. Standard pilots find the transition from propeller to jet too difficult. But we think you boys might have a different perspective. Samuel understood the subtext immediately. They expected black pilots to fail, confirming their prejudices. But if by some miracle they succeeded, the military could claim credit for training them while keeping the success marginal. After all, the Biog Unshat was already considered a failure. It was a trap with no exit. Succeed with an inferior aircraft, and they'd simply be given more inferior aircraft. Fail, and it would prove they never belonged in the sky at all. Sir, Samuel spoke up, what's the training timeline? 6 weeks to solo qualification. 12 weeks to combat readiness evaluation. Hardwick's smile was thin as paper. Though I expect you'll wash out long before then. The Biog Unshat has broken more experienced pilots than you. At night, in the segregated barracks they called home, the 12 pilots gathered around a table covered with technical manuals. The Biog Unshat specifications read like a catalog of compromises: underpowered engines, limited fuel capacity, weapon systems that overheated, and handling characteristics that changed dramatically with speed. We're going to fail, Kane stated flatly, his finger tracing performance curves that nosedipped at high altitude. There's no way to make these aircraft competitive with contemporary fighters. It's mathematically impossible. Then we stop trying to make it competitive, Samuel replied. We make ourselves better instead. If you're already sensing something incredible is about to happen, hit that subscribe button now. This story reveals why the hardest path often creates the strongest warriors, and you won't want to miss a single chapter. Let me show you what happened next. Captain Cross leaned forward, interested despite his skepticism. Explain. Every pilot in the Air Forces trains on forgiving aircraft. Smooth engines, stable platforms, systems that compensate for mistakes. They learn to be adequate because the machines allow adequacy. Samuel tapped the PBOG Unshot manual. This jet doesn't allow adequacy. Every flaw in your technique, every fraction of a second of delayed response, every imprecise input, it punishes you immediately. That's supposed to be a good thing, another pilot asked. It's supposed to be a refining fire. Samuel's eyes gleamed with sudden understanding. But he knows the way that I take. When he has tested me, I will come forth as gold. Job deshta beje 10 minute. They think they're giving us an impossible. But what if impossible tests create impossible pilots? Over the next 6 weeks, the 12 pilots of the experimental jet program entered hell. The PBOG Unshot was a demand to fly. Its jet engines responded to throttle changes with a delay that felt like eternity in combat situations. Its controls became mushy above 350 and dangerously sensitive below 200. It had a tendency to snap roll without warning if the pilot breathed wrong on the stick. And its engines, temperamental as prima donnas, would flame out if the fuel mixture was off by even small margins. Standard pilots trained on stable PBOG Ekanos and forgiving PBOG Shatchulis found the jet impossible. 5 white pilots had already washed out of the program before it was given to Tuskegee. But Samuel approached it differently. If the jet punished imperfection, he would become perfect. He flew 4 times a day, every day, logging more hours than any pilot in the program. He practiced throttle control until he could feel the engine's response before it happened, learned the aircraft's language of vibration and sound. He discovered that the PBOG Unshot wasn't unstable, it was honest. It told you immediately when you'd made a mistake, while conventional aircraft had errors until they became catastrophic. Watch the manifold pressure at the 3/4 throttle transition, Samuel coached the others, sharing every insight. There's a resonance point. Feel it before you see it, and the roll stability, it's not random. It responds to yell. Stop trying to fight the rolls, anticipate them. Move with the aircraft, not against it. Captain Cross, flying his 20th training sortie, experienced what Samuel meant. During a high turn, his PBOG Unshot started to snap roll, the violent, uncontrolled rotation that had crashed the prototypes. But instead of fighting the controls, Cross relaxed, let himself feel the aircraft's movement, and made tiny, precise corrections. The jet steadied. For the first time, Cross and machine moved as one entity. It's like the PBOG Unshot knows when you're afraid. Cross sighed after landing, his hand still trembling slightly. The moment you tense up, try to muscle it, it rebels. But if you trust it, fly with confidence. Then it trusts you back, Samuel finished. That's the secret. This isn't about controlling the aircraft. It's about partnership with something more powerful than you. But not everyone could make the transition. 3 pilots washed out in the first 4 weeks, unable to overcome their training on conventional aircraft. The habits that had kept them 11 PBOG Julis and PBOG Shatjulis actively worked against them in the jet. Colonel Hardwick watched each failure with satisfaction, already preparing the report that would cite the limited capacity of Negro pilots for advanced aircraft. Then came the evaluation flights. Week 8. The evaluation that would determine whether the program continued or was quietly buried in classified file cabinets. The always brutal, a simulated combat scenario against the PBOG Econo Mustangs flown by white pilots from the Bahamian fighter group, men with combat experience in Europe, its ratings, and a smirk that said they knew exactly how this would end. Samuel would fly against them in the PBOG Unshot. Alone. This is murder, Captain Cross sighed as they watched Samuel gear up. The Mustang is faster, more maneuverable, better armed. And it'll be 2 against one. 3 against one, Samuel corrected, tapping the side of the PBOG Unshot. I've got head. The morning air was cold and still as Samuel climbed into the jet's cockpit. The seat felt like home now, every switch and lever familiar as his own fingers. He went through the starter posture with meditative focus, fuel pumps on, ignition sequence, feeling the twin jets spool up with their characteristic whine. As he tacked it to the runway, Samuel noticed Hardwick standing near the tower, stopwatch in hand, surrounded by evaluation officers from Washington. They'd come to witness the final proof that the Negro jet program was a failed experiment. The Biog Ekanos were already airborne, circling at 10,000 feet like hawks waiting for prey. Arakama 3-3, you are cleared for takeoff, the tower announced. Rules of engagement, simulated combat until one aircraft achieves kill position. Good luck. The jet engine screamed as Samuel released the brakes. The Biog Unshat accelerated smoothly, breaking ground at Akshudoshnv. He retracted the landing gear and began his climb, feeling the aircraft mood, sensing its readiness. At 3 feet, he spotted the Mustangs diving toward him from above, the classic attack, using altitude advantage to build speed. In a conventional aircraft, Samuel would have tried to climb to gain equal footing. Instead, he dove. The Biog Unshat plunged toward the earth, trading precious altitude for speed. The Mustangs followed, their pilots thinking they'd already won. At Charshulmuth, Samuel was pushing the jet to its rated maximum, the controls growing mushy as the airframe shuddered. But he'd flown this aircraft in every regime, knew its soul. At 3 feet, with the Mustangs closing for the kill, Samuel did something that should have been impossible. He pulled hard. The Biog Unshat came around in a turn so tight that gravity crushed Samuel into his seat with nearly shot gus, his vision narrowed to a tunnel, blood pooling in his extremities. But had trained for this, he knew how to breathe, how to tense his muscles to keep conscious. The Mustangs, traveling faster, couldn't match the turn. They flashed past his nose, and suddenly, impossibly, Samuel was behind them. Brake! Brake! One of the Biog Ekano pilots shouted, recognizing the danger. But Samuel was already there, his gun camera capturing the perfect firing solution. Kill on the first Mustang. The second Biog Ekano pilot was better, more experienced. He immediately went into a series of rolling scissors maneuvers, the classic dogfight tactic. The Mustang should have had the advantage, better acceleration, better speed, better everything. But Samuel had spent 8 weeks learning to fly imperfectly perfect. Where the Mustang pilot made good decisions, Samuel made decisions that were 2% better. Where the Biog Ekano pulled chides, Samuel pulled chide the Shumik Badges, riding the edge of what he could handle. Most critically, Samuel was flying a machine that taught him to be flawless. The Biog Unshat had no forgiveness, which meant he had learned to need none. Every control input was exact. Every tactical decision was optimal. 8 weeks of flying on unforgiving aircraft had eliminated every wasted movement, every hesitation, every imprecise thought. The dogfight lasted 3 minutes. To the observers on the ground, it looked like a ballad of violence, though aircraft spiraling through the sky in combat so close that wingtips nearly touched. Then, suddenly, it was over. Samuel's Biog Unshat sat perfectly positioned 2 yards behind the Mustang, gun camera lockdown. Kill, the evaluation officer announced over the radio, his voice carrying disbelief. The jet has achieved kill position. Samuel didn't celebrate. He simply flew his aircraft back to base, landed with precision that made it look easy, and shut down the engines. If your mind is blown by what just happened, show your support by smashing that like button. And drop a comment, have you ever seen greatness emerge from impossible circumstances? Share your story below. Now, let's see what happens next. The crowd waiting on the flight line was silent. Colonel Hardwick's face had gone the color of spoiled meat. The evaluation officers from Washington were frantically taking notes. Captain Cross was the first to reach Samuel as he climbed down from the cockpit. How? Cross asked simply. The Mustang pilots flew a good fight, Samuel replied, removing his helmet. But they learned on aircraft that forgave mistakes. They've made thousands of small errors in their carriers, and their planes compensated. They don't even know they're doing it anymore, the imprecision is invisible. He patted the Biog Unshat's fuselage. She taught me that invisible mistakes are still mistakes. And in combat, mistakes are death. Over the next 4 weeks, the remaining 9 pilots completed their evaluations. All 9 defeated experienced pilots flying superior aircraft. Not through luck or chance, but through a level of precision that seemed almost supernatural. The evaluation officers couldn't explain it on paper, the P-Biog Unshot was inferior in every measurable way. But the pilots had mastered it, flew with a skill that transcended the aircraft's limitations. It's like they're thinking 3 moves ahead, Une evaluator observed, watching Lieutenant Kane dismantle to P-Biog Shotjulis in a simulated engagement. Like they can see the future. Not the future, Samuel corrected, overhearing. Just the present, more clearly than everyone else. When you fly an aircraft that shows you every mistake in real time, you learn to see mistakes before they happen. In yourself and in your opponent. The Pentagon took notice. By March 1945, with the war in Europe winding down, the military faced a new question: what to do with pilots who'd been forged in impossible circumstances. The P-Biog Unshot program was officially declared a failure, too slow, too limited for frontline combat. But the pilots? They were quietly reassigned to P-Biog Ashi Shooting Stars, America's next-generation jet. And then to evaluation squadrons. And then, eventually, to training commands. Because someone, somewhere in the military hierarchy, realized something profound: the best way to create exceptional pilots wasn't to give them the best aircraft. It was to make them master the worst. The war ended before Samuel ever flew combat missions, a fact that both relieved and frustrated him. Had trained for battle, but would never owe himself against the enemy. Or so he thought. In 1946, the Army Air Forces, soon to become the Independent U.S. Air Force, began experimenting with advanced tactics and aircraft. Jets were the future, but jet combat was fundamentally different from propeller warfare. Speed, energy management, and precision mattered more than traditional dogfighting skills. The military needed instructors who understood this new paradigm. They needed pilots who could teach the next generation how to fight in the jet age. They needed the men who'd survived the P-Biog Unshot. Samuel, now promoted to major, found himself at Nellis Air Force Base in Nevada, assigned to the Fighter Weapons School, the program that would eventually evolve into what pilots called Top Gun. His students were America's best, combat veterans, natural pilots, men who'd survived the crucible of war. And Samuel broke them. All of them. You're flying like this is ek Samuel told a class of 20 students after their first evaluation flights. You're making decisions based on what worked in P-Biog Ekanos and P-Biog Shotjulis. Propeller-driven tactics. But those tactics will kill you in a jet. Sire, one student, a captain with 11 confirmed kills over Germany, raised his hand. I've been flying fighters for 4 years. I know how to dogfight. Show me, Samuel replied, gesturing to the flight line where P-Biog Ashi Shooting Stars waited. 30-minute engagement. You against me. The captain grinned, confident in his experience and combat record. The rest of the class watched as both aircraft took off, climbing into the bright Nevada sky. 18 minutes later, the captain's Biog Ashi landed, the pilot shaken. Samuel had killed him 7 times in a row, using the same aircraft, the same fuel load, the same weapons. Not through superior equipment or lucky breaks, but through a level of flying precision the captain had never encountered. You're not better than me because you're more talented, Samuel explained to the assembled class afterward. You're not even better trained, you have more combat experience than I do, but I learned on an aircraft that demanded perfection. You learned on aircraft that hid imperfection. That difference compounds every day until it becomes an unbridgeable gap. He walked to the blackboard and drew a simple diagram. Standard pilot training creates competence. You learn the basics, practice them until they're smooth, and then you go to war. Most of you survive because your aircraft are good enough to compensate for the percentage of mistakes you don't even know you're making. Samuel drew a second column. But we learned on an aircraft where that percentage would kill you. So we eliminated it not just in our flying, but in our thinking. We see those micro mistakes in ourselves and in every opponent we face. Over the next 6 months, Samuel and the other P-Biog Unshot veterans transformed the Fighter Weapons School. They introduced training techniques that seemed brutal, deliberate practice with artificially limited aircraft, simulated emergencies during every flight, evaluation standards that were barely achievable. You're trying to break us, one student complained after his 8th failed evaluation. No, Captain Cross replied. Cross had joined Samuel as an instructor, bringing his own insights from the jet program. We're trying to refine you. Consider it pure joy whenever you face trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance. Let perseverance finish its work so that you may be mature and complete, not lacking anything. James Ek, 2 April. This isn't a church, Captain. No, but the principle applies. Gold is purified through fire. Warriors are purified through challenge. We're not breaking you, we're burning away everything except excellence. The results were undeniable. Pilots who completed the program flew with a precision that seemed almost mechanical, yet with creativity that surprised even experienced adversaries. They went on to become squadron commanders, or pilots, and eventually the architects of American air combat doctrine for the Cadets. This is where it gets really intense. Drop a comment and tell me, what's on a skill you mastered by doing it the hard way? How did that challenge change you? And make sure you've subscribed, we're about to reveal something that will blow your mind. But the real revelation came in 1950, when war broke out in Korea. The Chinese and North Koreans flew Soviet-built MiG-29 jets that were, on paper, superior to American MiG-27s in almost every way. Faster at high altitude, better climbing performance, heavier armament. The MiG-29 should have dominated the skies. Instead, American pilots achieved a kill ratio of 12, 14 MiG-29 shot down for every MiG-30 lost. Military analysts struggled to explain this disparity. The aircraft specifications didn't support it. Pilot numbers were roughly equal. What was the American advantage? The answer came when someone analyzed the training records. Pilots would go on through the fighter weapons school, the program shaped by Samuel and the other PBOG veterans, had a kill ratio nearly twice as high as pilots would receive standard training. It wasn't the aircraft. It was the men flying them. We created a lineage, Samuel explained to a Pentagon board investigating the phenomenon. He was 40 years old now, a lieutenant colonel, and the Air Force's leading expert on fighter tactics. The PBOG tout is that difficulty creates capability. We built that principle into training. And now, every pilot who graduates from the fighter weapons school carries that understanding forward. You're suggesting that learning on an inferior aircraft made you superior pilots, the general asked skeptically. I'm suggesting that learning on an unforgiving aircraft made us flawless pilots. And flawless beats superior every single time. The board was silent, digesting this. The PBOG program was designed to fail, Samuel continued. You gave it to us expecting, maybe hoping, we'd crash and burn, confirming your prejudices. Instead, we found something you didn't intend, prove that limitation is just potential waiting to be unlocked. But the forge of difficulty creates stronger steel than the comfort of adequacy. By 1950, Samuel's influence on American military aviation was undeniable. The training programs had developed were being adopted across the Air Force. The tactics had pioneered in the primitive PBOG were now standard for jet combat. And the philosophical approach, that difficulty creates excellence, was becoming doctrine. But Samuel's greatest challenge was yet to come. Legacy of the unforgiving ski. The year was 1950, and the jet age had fully arrived. Aircraft were flying faster than sound, pushing boundaries that seemed impossible a decade before. But with new technology came new problems. Accident rates were climbing, and skilled pilots were dying in training at alarming rates. The Air Force's solution was automation. Install systems that compensated for pilot error, create aircraft that were easier to fly, reduce the skill threshold required for jet operations. Samuel saw this as a catastrophe in the making. You're creating a generation of adequate pilots, he argued at a Pentagon strategy meeting facing a room full of generals without them outdated. Pilots who rely on their aircraft to compensate for imperfect technique. And the moment those systems fail, and they will fail, those pilots will die. Colonel Michels, a three-star general replied with barely concealed condescension, would move beyond your depression or barnstorming philosophy. Modern aircraft require modern training approaches. We can't recreate your PBOG trial by fire methodology for every pilot. Why not? Samuel challenged. Not with the PBOG specifically, but with the principle. Give pilots challenges that demand perfection. Create training environments that punish mistakes immediately and clearly. Build warriors, not button pushers. That's inefficient. We need volume, hundreds of pilots per year. Your methods take too long, wash out too many candidates. My methods create pilots who survive and win. Your methods create statistics. The meeting ended in stalemate. Samuel knew he was fighting institutional momentum, a military-industrial complex that preferred easy, quantifiable metrics over difficult, qualitative excellence. But he had only a card left to play. Using his influence and reputation, Samuel established an experimental training squadron at Nellis, officially till the Advanced Fighter Tactics Program, unofficially known as Prophet's Crucible. Entry was voluntary, and the washout rate was over 70%. But pilots who graduated became legends. The program's centerpiece was Samuel's final innovation. They took modern jets, Biog Exo Super Sabres and Biog Exo Dui Delta Dagers, and artificially limited them. Reduced engine power by 40%. Disabled certain avionics. Created aircraft that were technically inferior to the standard variants. Then they taught pilots to be superior anyway. "You're crippling our jets," complained Lieutenant David Morrison, a hotshot pilot with natural talent, but undisciplined technique. "How are we supposed to win with only hand tied behind our backs?" "You're not supposed to win with equipment," Samuel replied, now 50 years old but still flying regularly. "You're supposed to win with skill. The equipment is just a tool. A hammer doesn't build the house, the carpenter does." Morrison scoffed. "That's outdated thinking, sir. Modern air combat is about technology superiority." "Then let me show you something." Samuel took Morrison up on a two-ship training engagement. Samuel flew the crippled Biog Exo with reduced power and limited systems. Morrison flew a fully capable aircraft with every advantage. The engagement lasted 4 minutes. Samuel killed Morrison 3 times without Morrison ever achieving a firing solution. After landing, Morrison sat in his cockpit for 10 minutes, processing what had just happened. When he finally climbed down, his cocky demeanor had evaporated. "How?" he asked simply. "Because I learned to fly when mistakes mean dying, and I've never forgotten that lesson." You learned to fly when your aircraft caught your mistakes for you. It made you good. But it didn't make you great. Morrison became one of the program's most dedicated students, eventually graduating and going on to become one of the Vietnam War's early aces. Years later, he would shy that Samuel's artificial limitations taught him more about flying than all his previous training combined. By 1960, Samuel's methods were vindicated. Pilots from the Advanced Fighter Tactics Program consistently outperformed conventionally trained pilots by wide margins. The washout rate was high, yes, but the pilots who made it through were virtually indestructible. The Air Force, reluctantly at first, began incorporating Samuel's principles into mainstream training. Not wholesale adoption, that would take decades, but enough to shift the culture. If this story moved you, if it changed how you think about challenge and growth, I need you to do 3 things. First, destroy that like button. Second, subscribe and hit notifications. We tell stories that will transform your perspective every week. Third, comment below with the hardest lesson you ever learned. What impossible challenge made you who you are today? I read every single comment. Now, let's finish this incredible story. Samuel retired from active duty in 1965 as a full colonel, having never served in combat despite being one of the most influential fighter pilots in American history. His legacy wasn't measured in kills or victories, but in the thousands of pilots had trained and the philosophy had embedded in American aviation. But the story doesn't end there. In 1975, the Navy established the Fighter Weapons School, the real Top Gun, based explicitly on principles Samuel had pioneered 30 years earlier. Challenge-based training. Aggressor squadrons flying with limitations. Evaluation standards that demanded perfection. In the 1980s, the Air Force created red flag exercises, massive realistic combat training scenarios designed to push pilots to their breaking points before they faced actual combat. By the 1990s, the military had come full circle. Training aircraft were being chosen not just for their advanced capabilities, but for their teaching value. The Tibiog Autotriche Talon remained in service decades beyond its technological relevance, because it demanded precision from student pilots. And in the 2010, one of Biog.3's Lightning I entered service as the most technologically advanced fighter ever built, military researchers discovered something startling. Pilots would learn on older, less sophisticated aircraft often became more proficient in the Biog.3 than pilots would train exclusively on modern jets. The reason? Those older aircraft demanded skills that the Biog.3's automation made optional. But in combat situations where systems failed or adversaries found ways to negate technological advantages, those optional skills became critical. Samuel Michels died in 2018 at the age of 96, having witnessed the vindication of everything he'd fought for. His funeral at Arlington National Cemetery was attended by 3-star generals, all pilots, astronauts, many training programs had influenced, and over 200 men and women who'd gone through his training programs decades before. At the service, his grandson, himself an Biog Raptor pilot, read from a journal Samuel had kept during those early days with the Biog Unshat. They gave us the worst aircraft, expecting us to fail. They didn't understand that the worst aircraft can create the best pilots. Not despite its limitations, but because of them. Every restriction is a teacher. Every difficulty is a refiner. The unforgiving ski has always produced the finest warriors. They tried to limit us with bad equipment, with prejudice, with impossible standards. Instead, they created something they never intended, proved that human excellence can transcend any limitation when challenge meets determination. The Biog Unshat wasn't a curse. It was a blessing in disguise. And I thank God for it every day. The measure of excellence. Modern Biog.3 pilots train on simulators worth millions of dollars, in aircraft with computational power that would have seemed like science fiction in 1940. They have helmet-mounted displays that can see through the aircraft, sensors that detect threats beyond visual range, and weapon systems that can engage multiple targets simultaneously. They are, by any objective measure, the most capable fighter pilots in history. But occasionally, during advanced training, they face off against aggressor squadrons flying older Biog Shulos with artificially limited systems, reduced power, disabled avionics, deliberate handicaps. And sometimes, those handicapped Biog Shulos, flown by pilots trained in the Prophet's crucible tradition, beat the Biog.3. Not because the Biog Shulo is better, but because the pilots flying them learned something that the Biog Unshat veterans discovered 70 years ago. Excellence isn't about having the best tools. It's about being the best with whatever tools you have. The unforgiving aircraft creates the flawless pilot. Challenge creates champions. And limitation, properly embraced, becomes unlimited potential. The Belpi Biog Unshat Aerocomet never fired a shot in anger. It was retired as a failure, remembered as a footnote in aviation history, eclipsed by better jets that came after. But the men who flew it, who took the worst aircraft and used it to become the best pilots, they changed everything. They proved that adversity is just excellence waiting to emerge. That the hardest path creates the strongest travelers. And they left a legacy that echoes in every fighter pilot who learns that the true measure of capability isn't what you have, but what you do with it. When I was a child, I talked like a child, I thought like a child, I reasoned like a child. When I became a man, I put the ways of childhood behind me. At Corinthians 13:11. The Biog Unshat forced grown men to put away childish things, to stop relying on perfect equipment, to stop making invisible mistakes, to stop being inadequate when excellence was possible. It was the worst aircraft that created the best pilots. And perhaps that was divine intention all along.